Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today I'm going to be reviewing Battlefield Hardline, the multiplayer. I've sunk a lot of time into this via the alpha, the beta, and now final release. And I'll be going over pretty much every aspect of this game that I like and dislike. Now, for those of you not familiar with my channel, I love Battlefield. It is my bread and butter game. So some of the things I praise this game for might seem overly simplistic, and some of my criticisms may seem overly harsh. And this simply comes from the fact that I'm a huge fan of the Battlefield franchise, and I want nothing but the best for it. Now let's start off with some of the big ticket items that Battlefield Hardline does right. First of all, the map design is fantastic. I think they put a lot of time into each of these maps. It's clear that there was a lot of planning and both timing on how to get to objectives, the layout of maps, how that was going to affect gameplay in different game modes, and it's very clear that a lot more planning went into these map designs than, say, perhaps some of the map designing in its predecessor, Battlefield 4. One of my favorite maps is Bank Job. It offers a lot of really well planned out flanking routes. There's roof combat, there's street level combat, there's even subterranean combat. It just plays really well and offers something for pretty much all classes to do on that map, and it doesn't even offer vehicles, which is honestly one of Hardline's top selling points. Now, one of the harder parts of making a Battlefield game based on a cops and criminals world is that you have to get rid of things that don't make sense in a cops and criminals world. You can't really have tanks rolling around the streets of LA in any sort of realistic bank heist. You also can't have F-35 fighter jets strafing by targets and blowing them up with guided bombs and lock-on missiles. So you gotta get rid of jets, you have to get rid of tanks, and that's really the bread and butter of traditional Battlefield. So how do you make a vehicle-oriented Battlefield without those two things? Well, quite ingeniously, Hardline took basic transportation vehicles like sedans and coupes and trucks, and they made them incredibly fun to play with teammates. You can drive them around, you can let your teammates hang out the windows, use their standard weapons, or even pick up rocket launchers around the maps and fire those from the windows and back doors of vans and stuff like that. And you get into these incredibly team-oriented chase scenes that are just an absolute blast. And the new Hotwire game mode really shows off this vehicle combat at its best. It's basically Conquest, except where cars are the capture points. There's several high-value cars throughout the map. You have to get to them, drive them at a certain speed, and then keep them away from the enemies. As long as you're driving at a certain speed, you will have captured that car, and it will start generating points for you and your team. And naturally, the enemy team is going to try and catch up with you and take you out. So this leads to lots of car chases. It's fast-paced and a lot of fun. And Hotwire is just one of Hardline's many new game modes. They have Heist, which is kind of an alternative to the Rush game, and they also have Blood Money, which is sort of a new take on Capture the Flag, although that's almost a disservice to it because Capture the Flag is nowhere near as much fun as Blood Money. There's also a few smaller scale game modes like Rescue, which is essentially a Counter-Strike hostage rescue style game mode, and then there's also Crosshair, which involves taking a high value target who is one of your teammates to a certain location without them dying. Now, I'm personally not as interested in these smaller scale game modes. I think there's other games out there that probably play this game mode a little bit better, but I will say that Hotwire, Heist, and Blood Money are three extremely successful game modes, and that's really impressive considering that most Battlefield titles launch with only one type of new game mode. This one has three really successful new game modes that I'm playing all the time and basically haven't made me really want to go back and play some of the classics like Conquest. I'm having way too much fun playing Hotwire, Blood Money, and Heist. They're just a blast. Now, that being said, some of the things that makes a Battlefield game Battlefield kind of ruin these game modes. For example, 64-player servers don't really work so well in Heist, Blood Money, or even Hotwire so well. I would say Hotwire is probably one of the few game modes that accepts 64 players the best, but a lot of these maps are actually smaller, more close quarter oriented, and a lot of them are not server size caps, so you can have as many players in them as you want, and it gets absolutely crazy, and it just takes all the tactics out of the game mode. Now, I do know that it was the intention of many of the devs to player cap these game modes. The fact that they're not now leads me to believe that it's actually maybe a technical issue and or a bug in the server settings, so it's possible that we might see a lot of player cap rules coming into the ranked servers at a later date. I don't really know the actual story on this, but one can only hope. Now, because of the general switch up with not having as much heavy armor in this game, the mechanic class, also known as the engineer from previous Battlefield games, wasn't as useful, and thus they had to shift around a lot of the class gadgets and the class basically abilities, what they're used for. And I think they've actually balanced out the classes in a really really, really good way. I think they're all very well balanced, although if you are playing something like, say, Team Deathmatch, you're going to see a ton of operators because the operators still have some of the best guns in the game. They have the ability to revive and heal themselves. So there's still sort of that classic syndrome of the medic being one of the best classes in Battlefield, and it's pretty hard to get around that. That being said, the mechanic, which uses PDWs exclusively, has some of the best close quarter weapons in the game. The Breacher class, which has access to shotguns, can now absolutely tear people apart with one-shot kills from pump action shotguns, and the Recon class gets access to new and improved bolt-action rifles like the Scout Elite, which can now one-shot headshot from any range across the map and has an incredibly high rate of fire for a bolt-action rifle. So every class has kind of seen a general upgrade, and I think everybody's liking it. The new and improved progression system is actually a lot of fun as well. Rather than having to unlock gadgets or gear for weapons in sort of a linear progression, you now get money and you can choose to buy which guns you want and which attachments for those guns that you want. So it basically allows you to choose your own adventure, if you will. Choose your own path through Battlefield Hardline. And they also have a cool series of assignments for some of the harder to get guns in the game that are not just reliant on getting a certain amount of kills or points, but you actually have to go through and play objectives in certain ways, and it kind of teaches you, or rather forces you, to play the game with a different mindset. And by the time you've unlocked some of these guns, you will have played classes in pretty much all the different ways that they are meant to be played. So it's a cool way of teaching you the game in order to get some of the harder to get weapons. That being said, there's also some flaws with the system. For example, the new boost system that allows you to apply XP multipliers to your character for completing different tasks in multiplayer games. It's a cool concept. However, that XP multiplier affects your overall score in the server. So anybody could apply a 200% XP multiplier, and all of a sudden they have a much better chance of getting MVP in that round just because they're using a boost. It's pretty much like cheating the scoreboard, and that simply has to go. Previous Battlefield games have had XP multipliers, but they never apply it to the actual scoreboard, so your overall ranking among your competitors is not changed just because you have an XP boost. They also could have done a better job at trying to equalize the points you get from playing different game modes. Hotwire is a very, very easy way to get a lot of points very quickly, so it's a great way to rank up and get lots of cash for your character, but it's not necessarily the game mode that everybody wants to play all the time. Once you switch over to other game modes like Team Deathmatch, your points per minute is going to go downhill extremely fast. It would have been cool if they tried to normalize the point gain across different game modes a little bit better. This way you weren't swayed to play certain game modes just because they're going to allow you to rank up quicker. Now, I mentioned that I really like the class balance in this game, but within each class the weapon balance is not that great. For example, if you're playing the operator, there just isn't really any reason to use a carbine. They don't make any sense statistically in why you would pick one over an assault rifle. If you're playing the mechanic, the K10 is by far the best weapon available to him, and there's nothing that even comes close to dethroning that one. So without question, there's a bit of work that needs to be done in balancing the weapons within each class just to make it a little bit more interesting. There's also a few game modes that seem like they really got brushed over in terms of the amount of QA treatment. For example, Team Deathmatch has a horrible spawn system. I'll show you here. All these clips come from one game of playing TDM on Riptide. I was basically spawning and dying repeatedly. This map is fairly large, and sometimes my attacker was no more than 10 feet away from me when I was being shot, so it didn't make a lot of sense in why I was spawning so close to enemy players. It seems like there could have been plenty of other options for me to spawn. It just seems like there wasn't any sort of spawn algorithm implemented whatsoever. TDM is one of those game modes that gets easily overlooked because it's so simple in nature. You don't really need to do too much balancing with it, but I gotta say, Visceral, you really need to spend some time with your spawning locations and spawning algorithms. Maybe even add a little bit of extra cover into some of these maps. Now, as much as I praised Hotwire earlier in this video, there is an issue that is going to basically get out of control in, I would say, maybe a couple of days, and that is basically the trunk spawning RPG. After you get, I think it's around $47,000, you can buy an RPG upgrade for each sedan in the game. You can also add this to coupes. So basically, when you spawn in your deployment, you can pop an RPG out of the trunk of your car. You can basically just have it and go through the map and just blow up any car with one shot from any RPG. This is a stupidly easy way to get kills, and it's incredibly easy to take out other cars in hotwire mode. It's way too easy to abuse this, and once everybody has a trunk spawnable RPG, it's basically just going to be RPG warfare. My suggestion would be removing the trunk spawnable RPG from the game and just putting it in various locations throughout the map. That way people are fighting for tactical locations rather than just starting with a one-hit kill rocket launcher. Now, I could go on and on and on about all the small things that I think this game could do to improve upon itself. I think the devs actually know about most of them, but I'll save some of that for future videos focusing on certain aspects of the game or certain balance issues. Overall though, the game is really solid. It's been a lot of fun to play so far, and it hasn't had any major launch issues, which is great. They did delay the launch of this game to try and polish it more and get it working correctly, and I think that really paid off, and I appreciate the heck out of that. It's nice to see a AAA title that is not riddled with bugs on launch day. Now, out of all the cool little features that Hardline has added to the Battlefield franchise, one of my favorite things that this game has done is actually a lack of features, and that is no UCAV, no mortar, no AC-130, no SUAV, no XM25, and all the bullshit gimmicky gadgets that look great in trailers but end up sucking and ruining the gameplay for traditional shooter fans, people who actually like to aim down sights and shoot at the person that they're fighting. It's much more entertaining for me, requires more skill, and is less aggravating. Anyway, that wraps it up for my Battlefield Hardline multiplayer review. There is a single player review in the works, stay tuned for that. And as always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap, signing out.